You are listening to a special broadcast regarding the 2022 general local elections on Peach City Community Radio on CFUZ 92.9 FM and online at www.peachcityradio.org. Peach City Radio volunteers invited all 5 registered candidates for mayor of the city of Penticton to be interviewed. Key topics were selected to be asked to all candidates, with several questions developed for each specific candidate based on their campaign or on public information. All mayoral interviews have been made available for streaming on peachcityradio.org. Peach City Radio is actively looking for volunteers interested in news and events that would like to bring their passion to the airwaves. Email news@cfuz.ca or contact the station if you're interested in joining our news and events collective and make impactful radio in the South Okanagan. Peach City Radio and the interviewers do not endorse particular candidates. Interviews will be edited for time and sound quality, but not for content. And thank you for coming in. We have Owen Hayward, mayoral candidate for the city of Penticton in 2022. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
And you do have a radio voice. You mentioned that. That's awesome. What we're going to do is we're going to start off by learning a bit more about yourself and what brought you to Penticton and what's your connection to the city?
Well, my wife and I have owned a home here for 10 years. Prior to meeting each other individually, we both discovered Penticton. I, having been raised across Western Canada, living in all 4 Western provinces, had always Penticton coming through as a child caught my eye as one of the most lovely places to be, particularly in the summer. I love the sunshine. I love the peaches. Mm-hmm. And my wife, in her life, she discovered the wine. And then my wife works for Provincial Health. I'm a semi-retired curling ice maker, and COVID brought us here because my wife now does her job from home. And that allowed us to move into our home full-time 3 years ago.
Nice. So you've been in the community now for about 3 years, full-time?
Full-time, but we've been here, we've been here spending summers for 15 years, really.
And you said you grew up across Western Canada. Whereabouts in different spots?
Born in Burnaby and raised in Burnaby, Winnipeg, and Lethbridge, Alberta.
Nice. So you do know a lot of the different parts around here.
Yes.
In terms of some of the communities that you lived in, what have been your favorite beside Penticton?
Well, everywhere I've lived has its high points. I mean, I was very young when we moved to Winnipeg, and Winnipeg has a tough reputation, but I really enjoyed myself. It's where I learned to skate outdoors in the minus 30, minus 40. And
that's cold.
We didn't really even know it because we were kids. Didn't know any different. You know, the coast is a lovely place to be, except when it's gray and drizzly. Mm-hmm. And, I was a big basketball player in southern Alberta. It was a basketball hotbed when I was in junior high. So every community has its upsides. But, when it comes to Penticton, both my wife and I identified it as, to me, it's the nicest small city in Canada, and it compares with other small cities in the world, particularly in the summer, and even the winters are quite mild, really.
And you mentioned curling as an ice maker. Do you curl yourself?
Yes, I do curl as myself. I picked it up once I dropped my mainstream sports, and then the idea of working 8 months a year also caught my eye. So after I became a curler, then I drifted into curling ice making.
Nice. Well, it's very important. You're good between the sheets, as they say.
Yeah.
The first question that I have for you is why are you running?
Well, there you go. Great question. So I'll point out that I am the only mayoral candidate who lives in Penticton and has no connection to business, development, corporations, religions, special interest groups. So I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring because I have followed local issues here. And while Penticton is a wonderful place, and there's a ton of great people in this town doing a lot of heavy lifting with the nonprofits and volunteers, and it just seems to me that the municipal government isn't performing as well And it's not the best municipal government in the land, but Penticton's one of the nicest places. So I'd like to give the people an opportunity for a representative that represents the people, and I mean all aspects: the seniors, the young families. I'd like to see the nonprofits and the volunteers that are doing the heavy lifting, the small businesses, see them more supported, is maximally supported by our municipal government. And over the 12 to 15 years I've been watching local issues, it just seems to me there's a lot of taxpayer waste, and it's unclear to me why there aren't some more pragmatic, logical, common sense decisions being made out of City Hall.
Well, that elegantly moves me to my next question, which is, what are the biggest changes you want to see happen at City Hall?
Prudency with our tax dollars, and that's about it. We waste a lot of tax dollars. We've had lawsuits against the provincial government. I could bring up the bike lane, and I do believe in bike lanes, and now that it's been started, I would complete it. But it just seems to me that $32 million to build one bike lane is a lot of money. So I do believe in bike lanes. I believe in the future we're going to need more, and I will encourage that, but I think we might do them more simply and more cost effectively.
Okay, you brought up two issues for prudence, the lawsuit and the bike lane. Yeah. Where else do you see? Because those are two particular issues and particular projects, but where do you think you can find tax savings?
Well, I think we can find tax savings all over. I'll give you two more examples.
Please, yeah.
About common sense and one about prudence. So one that never hit the news and happened in my neighborhood up near Columbia Elementary. One, I talked to our current mayor a little over a year ago, and Sendero Canyon Development has a lone road that 90% of the people commute up. It's called Lawrence Avenue. It goes right beside Columbia Elementary. So I identified very quickly that there's a crosswalk there that the kids use to get to school. And without any speed enforcement, I have a fear that one of the kids or even one of the neighborhood walkers is going to get hit. So I suggested to the mayor that they put a speed bump for the crosswalk and slow people down. And his response was that the engineers were studying it and doing studies, and they'll look at it and they might put up a sign telling you how fast you're going. But to me, common sense says put a speed bump in now before somebody gets hit rather than after. Failing that, put some speed enforcement in, but we know that doesn't happen much in the city. Now, the other thing that happened in my neighborhood is they ripped up Ridgedale Avenue and they ripped up my lane and they refreshed the main sewer lines. Then, that was about 4 years ago, and then over the next 3 years, city crews would show up at random, cut big holes in the brand new pavement, and replace a small piece of the sewer. So one time I asked the crews, what are you up to? And they said, well, the contractor didn't properly put in the wings on the main sewer to the property line. So now they come back after somebody's sewer backs up, dig a great big hole, spend 4 or 5 days, and put in one wing. Well, that never hit the news, but that's going to cost us taxpayers a lot of money. So, to me, somebody dropped the ball and didn't make sure that the contractor was doing his job properly. So there's another example of government waste. I've talked about suing the government over the homeless situation, and I just don't see how that's going to help in the long run. I realize it got dropped eventually, but that's money going to lawyers. And we're getting in the face of the hand that feeds us, the province. And so those are some of the examples.
Well, thank you very much. So what are your expectations that you can actually accomplish in the next 4 years if you are elected as mayor?
Well, I'll go back to the beginning that I would try to lead the council to make prudent, common sense decisions, not do as many studies, not pay as many consultants, and just be more pragmatic and prioritize. So back to basics, make sure our infrastructure is on schedule and being maintained, make sure our police force and our firefighters have the tools to do their jobs properly. And then at the core, one of the core issues is the homeless, mental health, opioid situation. And I am of the belief that we need to do something ourselves. In Canada, over my lifetime, we've seen the federal government dump responsibilities onto the province, and the province is now dumping it onto the municipalities. And everybody keeps talking about lobbying the provincial government for more money, and we will continue to do that. In the meantime, I think we cut to the chase, and we find a way to take some of our own city money and properly address this situation. We get the homeless into shelters and or homes, and the current term is wraparound, or 4 pillars, and we make sure these people get some mental health counseling, we give them safe drug supply, and we give them the complete package and give them an opportunity to get back on their feet and become functioning citizens again. Some things that have happened in this town is too many rules where the homeless get turned away. Well, you're not going to solve the homeless problem if you don't get people into homes. It's a simple, basic, common sense thing. Nobody wants to do it, but in the modern day now, we know these aren't people. Underneath these people have health problems. And in the old days, the old reefer madness, heroin addict, I'm not giving my money to them. Well, we're beyond that. We all know about the opioid crisis, which was created by the big pharmacy companies. And these are everyday people that their sin was having some kind of pain. They got a prescription. They became addicted. So it's a health issue. We need to treat these people with compassion. Other cities have dealt with it. From a fiscal perspective, if we invest in it now, it's going to cost us less in the long run. It's just as simple as that. They have the numbers on those kinds of things. And I think it's more important for Penticton than many cities. We're a tourist-based economy. That's the core of this town. If we don't deal with it, I know the tourists don't enjoy it, and I know our citizens don't feel safe. A lot of our citizens don't feel safe. They don't feel safe going downtown, and I want to revitalize downtown. I want it to be vibrant. So we need to address that issue. Another benefit of dealing with that issue in that manner is that'll lessen the load on our firefighters and our police, and they can get on to more significant, more important matters and focus on their core duties, which is crime and policing. Crime will go down if we properly address the homeless mental health addiction issue. So those are some of my thoughts.
And this is the tricky part because, as you said, the province has downloaded a lot of responsibilities to local government. But the local governments have only so much power. They don't have power over interior health. They don't have power over the provincial authorities. How would you use the power of the city council to address some of these issues for homelessness and addiction that you see in the Penticton area? Specifically, what could council do, working with the province and working with the IH and other groups, but specifically, what can you do, concrete decisions that can be made at the council table besides pressuring IH and pressuring the province to do these things?
Well, we can take money away from some of our wants and perhaps with some public-private partnerships, build some actual social housing. We can work with the developers and tweak the zoning and give incentives to developers. We could approve, instead of a 5-story building, we could say, if you guys make it 6 and make 20% of what you're building housing for low-cost housing, initiatives like that. So we use the tools that we have, which the biggest are zoning, OCP, and we create incentives for developers. I'm well-read enough to know also that we don't want to just keep putting things in one particular area. The models that do work is you incorporate throughout the city in developments where you have the penthouse for the wealthy, other floors for the middle class, and one floor for low-cost housing. That incorporates it into the community because we are all one community. from the most vulnerable and the working poor to the wealthy. And the models that work is when you do it that way, rather than the way we're doing it now, taking some of our dilapidated hotels and creating ghetto strips. So those are some of the thoughts of how I would do it. We use the tools that we have, and we invest.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That was answering my question, which is awesome. You touched on mental health and housing for some of the street entrenched people in Penticton, but there's also an affordability crisis for kids, for middle class, even for seniors trying to find new homes. How would you advocate in terms of housing affordability and availability for all people in Penticton?
Well, there's a couple of ways. I mean, we have control of the zoning. We might tweak the OCP. I'd like to see if we're limited at 3 stories downtown, then maybe a few blocks off of the Lakeshore Drive, we go to 4 stories. And then a couple more blocks later, we go to 5. We start increasing density. And then the very hot topic is VRBO and Airbnbs. So it's pretty clear to me. I saw an ad the other day in the classifieds of the Herald that somebody's looking to rent a house, and they're willing to pay the landlord $500 a month extra because these people are not from Penticton, and they're going to rent the house and turn it fully into Airbnb. Throughout my campaign here, many people have approached me and have significant concerns about this, as do I. So we know with Airbnb and VRBO, that has taken a lot of the traditional rental stock off the market for local people to work. So instantly, if we limit Airbnbs to people who actually live here and maybe limit it to one part of their house, that should free up instantly some of available local rental housing, number one. Once again, we work with some developers, give them some incentives, maybe some public-private partnerships, and build some housing that could house people maybe that work at Apex in the winter. And we have a large service economy, and the business people have told me they're having trouble attracting people because there's nowhere to live. Further on that, we know the demographic of Penticton, and we really have to look to the future and make Penticton more attractive for young families, because there's going to be a tipping point not too far in the future. And if we don't make it attractive to young families, this town is going to die on the vine, and in effect will become the ghetto of the South Okanagan. And none of us want to see that. But these are things that will really happen if we don't change what we're doing. So on that note about young families, one thing I would do is have the city staff really aggressively reach out to some major companies to see if we can get some industry, attract some industry to town that has a significant portion of living wage jobs. And so those are some of my ideas on that.
I'm sure everyone would love to see more jobs in Penticton. To go back to your Airbnb question, though, there was a recent staff report that came in, and they noted that for accommodation in Penticton, there seemed to be a need for more accommodation. And as these hotels are being built in Penticton, and maybe future hotels will be built in Penticton, people that want to come here and spend their cash, vacation here, are using Airbnbs for vacation rentals. How do you think that people that want to come here and spend their money should be treated in terms of vacation rentals? Should they be still allowed to move forward as vacation rentals? You mentioned that you would like to see only, and I'm speaking from what I heard, and this is what I'm trying to clarify. Potentially, the only people that would be able to use Airbnb would be those that have suites inside their house. How restrictive do you see Airbnbs? Do you see there's any benefits that we could lose if we were too restrictive? And where do you want to land on this important issue?
Well, obviously, before we did anything, if I become mayor, I mean, I always do research. So I'm going to consult the experts and look at the numbers. My general understanding, talking with some of the other candidates, talking with some of the other concerned citizens, my understanding is our hotels and motels were not full this summer. So that's another thing. When we look at zoning, which the city controls, the motels are in areas that are zoned for motels and hotels, and the residences are in residential. So now that we have Airbnbs and VRBOs, now we essentially have mini hotels and motels in residential areas. So if we go to the 1 degree, imagine if you're a homeowner in a residential area and all of a sudden every house surrounding you is an Airbnb and people are coming and going and they might be partying late and so you've disrupted the neighborhood. So like anything, you want balance. So some of the ideas are floated, or we put a cap on how many. And then the other idea floated is that we restrict it to people who actually live in Penticton. And I kind of like that idea. We don't want to punish our own citizens. But what we don't want is drop in from other jurisdictions. They don't live here. They're going to make money off these Airbnbs and VRBOs, and they're not going to spend that money here. They're taking that out of Penticton. So I like the idea of restricting maybe the number and also restricting it to Penticton homeowners and residents. And then the hotels and motels, in theory, should get more business, and the tourists will be closer to the beaches and in the areas where we've designated them to be.
Well, thank you for that. You've actually answered the question, which is awesome. Next question. It's around crime. And there's also crime and the perception of crime. And I think you noted that by just noting some of the street entrenched people downtown may make people feel uncomfortable. It's been a major issue across this, not just in Penticton, but across British Columbia. How do you intend to address this issue for the city of Penticton?
Well, like I said, I think we invest in the 4-pillar program. We give the homeless homes. We give them counseling. And immediately, I believe, once we have that process complete, and let's say we get 90% of the current homeless off the street and give them a home, I think the corresponding crime will drop. Just by nature, a lot of the crime that we are having is petty crime by people who are addicts and don't have proper incomes and are looking for anything that's not tied down. I've talked to people that live down on Lakeshore in the apartments, and they don't have a locked parkade, and one fella's car has been broken into 7 times in 1 year. So that, if we included of a safe supply of drugs and maintenance drugs, then they're not wandering all around, then they're not looking to purchase from the black market, and that's where the overdoses come in. So I think if you attack that core issue, crime is going to come down correspondingly. I'm well aware of the studies about the rates of crime in this town and the amount of police officers and the amount of bylaw officers, but I think cost effectively, if we invest in the opioid mental health end of it, and we do it ourselves now and not wait and not keep screaming at the province, because I don't think they're going to do much for us. Other jurisdictions, Medicine Hat solved theirs. On the housing for service workers, another candidate pointed out Whistler solved their problem. So we send out delegates and we contact these cities. How did you do it? And we look at their model and we take what we like out of their model. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're doing effective, quick research, and we attack the issue. And I do believe, firmly believe, and studies will show that that type of petty crime is going to go down.
You mentioned the lawsuit, which was related to a temporary shelter. You must understand that housing for street entrenched people, people with mental illness, people that are perceived or probably likely to commit crime if they are a repeat offender, there's challenges in finding housing placement of that in the city of Penticton for wet facilities, safe injection sites, drug distribution points. How would you tackle that with some of the concerns that will be raised by those people that are going to be living nearby those types of facilities?
Well, I'm fairly well read on the topic, and we know there's certain models that don't work. And we're kind of doing those models now by filling the older motels down near Skaha as social housing. So you spread it out throughout the city relatively equally, and they get incorporated into the community. So once again, your 5-story, 6-story, 20% of the building is for low cost or social housing. We could also build ourselves with private partnerships and have public-private partnerships and have nonprofits run them. I've learned we do have a significant amount of city land, so we build some dedicated facilities ourselves and have nonprofits operate them. We use some of our own tax dollars, but we beat the bushes for grants. We continue to lobby, but we need to incorporate. We are an entire community, from our poorest, most vulnerable citizen to our wealthiest citizens. So the models that work is if we stay as a community. And the part of the pattern I've seen in Penticton is, yeah, great, but not in my neighborhood. And this is a pattern across the land. If we keep saying no, 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 then we're going to continue to have homeless. So this is the core issue. It's the modern day. We have a better understanding of this. So we need to deal with it, and we need to deal with it properly. And fiscally, if we invest our actual money instead of waiting for the province, it will save us money in the long run. It will make our city more pleasant to be in, and it will feel safer for every citizen. Right now, it's actually a pretty safe place to live. But the perception by our seniors and others is it doesn't feel safe. So if you don't feel safe, my neighbor doesn't want to leave her kids down at the skate park. Understandably, she doesn't feel safe to do so. So we need to create an environment where our citizens feel safe. And the fastest way is to give homes to the homeless, give them the supports they need, and make an all-out effort to help them get back as functioning citizens. These people have suffered trauma. Nobody goes out of their way to become an addict. These people have suffered in their lives. So fiscally, it makes sense. From a compassion sense, it makes sense. From a community basis, it makes sense. So we need to take a deep breath and attack that core issue and improve how Penticton feels for everybody.
Thank you. The lake-to-lake bike lane, you've already brought up that you would finish the project, and that's the current project that's in there now. How would you intend to address some of the concerns that have been raised on the current project, and how would you look at future bike lanes, and how would you proceed in terms of either public engagement or development of future bike lanes?
Everything I do is going to be based on communication and listening to the citizens. So more open communication, more pragmatism. I'd like to do some more. I'd like to increase our cooperation and better our relationship with the Penticton Indian Band. So one thing we could look at is the west side of the channel for the next bike lane. There is a path there now for pedestrians, and you could ride a bike on it. But I would look negotiating and communicating with the band. Do we upgrade it, widen it, and make it two separates for pedestrians and cyclists? I'm a firm believer in bike lanes. And I'm also a firm believer in not wasting money. So we're 3/4 done the existing bike lane. It's not probably the route I would have chose. The style of it, I've never seen one built quite like it. And at $32 million, it seems like a lot. So I will continue to support bike lanes, but we need to do it in a manner where we consult the people, minimize conflict, but do it prudently, simply, and cost efficiently. The future, I mean, we're talking environment here. We're talking transportation. So in the future, more people are going to ride bikes. In the future, we're going to have electric vehicles. In the future, more people are going to need to use the buses and transportation. So on that note, one thing I would do immediately is start talking to BC Transit. We have a bus system in this town. Some people tell me it's not the greatest and the routes are wrong, But regardless of that, we'd look at that. But I would lobby BC Trans and say, listen, most of the buses I see traveling around Penticton are pretty empty. So what if we find a way that seniors and students ride our buses for free? We have a lot of service workers. We could also look at that. But maybe we chip in some money as a community, and that way people can get around more environmentally friendly and also more cost effectively. So we invest a little, but we save a lot, and that fits with feeling safer, right? The bus is there, you can get on it free. If you're not feeling comfortable in a particular area, you get on the bus and go to another area. But so those are some of the things that I'm looking at.
You stated in a recent forum that you reduced fees, and you just mentioned the bus fees for some people, but you also mentioned parking downtown. But you also mentioned you'd like to provide more services, and you mentioned building potentially public-private partnerships with groups to develop and operate people that need housing. I'm not speaking very elegantly. As local governments cannot get into debt, how would you allow for any drop in revenue while also paying for new services that you've mentioned?
Well, until I become mayor and have a talk with the CAO and the CFO, I can't give you the actual details, but here's the rationale. So pay parking downtown. Here's what I said. So once again, I don't like throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and I don't like wasting money. So we've got the parking meters. So what I said was, we will end formal pay parking. We will keep the meters. We will change the signs, and it will become parking by donation.
Yeah, you did say that. Thank you for clarifying.
Right?
Yeah.
And we will put up signs also that indicate to the people where that money's going to go. And we don't know yet if there'll be a drop in revenue. First of all, a lot of people don't even look, so they might just put the money in anyways. Others, in other jurisdictions, sometimes people put in more. You know, I just had a chat with the CAO the other day, and there is one spot already in front of City Hall that is it's a donation meter. It's the one spot right out front, and that's the spot. It was available. I used it. I put some money in, right? When people see the sign and they read the sign, if they have the money, they're probably they might pay more than they did at the current rates. The fellow who's going to pop into a store for 2 seconds and grab something, now he's going to do that instead of going to the other end of the town to one of the plazas and the malls, and therefore keeping the balance. I believe, I don't know the stats, but I do believe business dropped for our downtown businesses. Our downtown physically is quite pleasant. Other towns I've been in, similar size, once the big box stores show up on the other side of town and then you add pay parking, then all of a sudden you got boarded up businesses. I'll go back. We're a tourist town. We don't need boarded up businesses. It doesn't look good. It starts to create a sad feeling and a dilapidated feeling. Once they're boarded up, the owners aren't going to maintain them until they get a new tenant. So this is a win-win-win to me. And it's a common sense thing. We don't put up barriers for our citizens to support these local businesses downtown. The Walmarts and the superstores and the Cherry Lane malls, they have their place. But it's a way of supporting small business, particularly downtown, to keep our downtown vibrant and alive. And it's important to me because I've lived in towns where the downtown is boarded up. It doesn't have a nice feel. It's not attractive, and it's a spiral down. And once it really goes down, then nobody goes downtown. And there go our local businesses. So we need to find ways that there's win-win-wins. We need to really focus. One of my theses is local, local, local. I use some of the businesses downtown. It costs me more, but I'm supporting local business. The money's staying in here. The small business guy who lives here, I help him make a living. He spends his money in town, right? When I buy at Walmart or Superstore, some of that money is not staying in town. So that's my focus here. Keep vibrancy downtown, and we need to create a more pleasant environment for our citizens to feel safe. So we'll deal with it. When we get there, we'll see if the revenue drops. We take it away from some of our wants. I want to focus on the problems as we see them, the problems that are irritating the common people of Penticton.
Property development in the outside area of Penticton. We have Sendero. We just had the Wiltsey development that was passed. And then we also have another development up by the landfill off Spiller Road. These are encroaching into areas of welfare interface, but they are providing homes to Penticton. They require more cars because they're further out. They're harder to put transit in. But again, they're providing homes to Penticton. Where do you stand on what I'll call urban sprawl, or the sprawling of the community into new areas that don't currently have homes, versus the need for homes in our communities, and how would you try to address that?
Well, I'm always looking at balance. Balance is the key. So let's go to the Naramata bench, which is a lot of resistance to that development. Now, the reality is I believe it's Horizons. They have the right to develop there under the current zoning. They keep coming back to City Council for a rezoning to get something more profitable for them and more what they want. If we keep poking them in the eye and saying no, I believe under the current zoning, they're going to put in a mobile home park and some other things they're zoned for. So one of the first things I'm going to do, they already own the land. They have the right to build there under the current zoning. So if I became mayor, I would encourage the council, we reach out to them very quickly and say, come on, we're a new council. Let's get together. Let's figure this out. Let's figure a balanced approach. Now, another thing is access. So there's kind of only one main road coming out of Naramata and whatever that development is. I've also reached out to the fire department, and I've talked about that. So I see that as a big issue, is access. So the fire department indicated that if anything happens up there, they've requested that a road get built. Maybe just a gravel road, maybe with a barrier that only the fire department can get through. But that's important from a safety aspect. If we get a forest fire up there or anything like that. And I see the same issue as Sendero. It's one way up, one way down. And then 700 residences are now kind of approved for the Wiltsey. It also has egress problems. And I believe reading in the paper, if they were accurate, the city responded when they were consulting the people up there. It was asked, well, like, what about all the traffic? How are we going to get off of the Wiltsey development? You know, I drive through the industrial area to go to Superstore, and shortly after that, there's 16 cars waiting at the four-way stop to get off of Wiltsey. You add 700 homes, it's going to be more than 16 cars. The city's response was, in the future, we hope more people bike and walk. So this is an unrealistic response. Nobody's going to buy a home up in Wiltsey and go to get their groceries by walking or bicycling. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. Maybe there are a few young, energetic people, but your average citizen is not going to do that. So that's an unrealistic response. So another core of mine is to be very more pragmatic and a little more common sense. So when we approve these developments, and this is done in other jurisdictions, you put incentives in for the developer or conditions. Yes, we will approve what you want, but you are going to have to pay for 2 more roads to get in and out of that area. So those are the ways that other jurisdictions, and I'm sure that we could do similar. As far as the urban sprawl, we aren't that big of a land. We can't expand much beyond. We can't expand beyond our borders, and we're not that big. However, I do understand your point. So I would very much encourage council that we tweak the OCP, change some of the zoning, and do a bit more density. It seems odd to me that we do allow larger buildings down at the Skaha end, but we're very restrictive as far as height on the Okanagan Lake end. One example, they turned down a 4-story in the core of downtown, and then the next thing you know, they approved a 5-story, and they approved another one on Lakeshore Drive. They gave all kinds of variances. Mm-hmm. To me, we got to tweak the OCP and the zoning and quit having these arguments on every single development about variances. That tells me your zoning's wrong. Make your zoning, stick with your zoning, but make your zoning realistic so that we aren't wasting time and energy on every small development that comes up. If you do your zoning properly and we streamline the system, we're going to encourage development, there'll be less time wasted, and we'll get more housing built.
And my last question, out of all the mayoral candidates, all five, you are arguably the hardest person to search online and find information on. How do you plan to differentiate yourself and let people know what your positions are and hopefully get yourself elected?
Well, that's a good question. So when I entered this race, my knowledge, I didn't know there were going to be five of us. It was only the incumbent councillor, Mr. Bloomfield, and our incumbent mayor. And I've seen enough, and I said, I've got the time, the energy, and I'm going to enter, and I'm going to enter the old-fashioned way on word of mouth. I am a little older, I'm not on social media, and also I'm a realist. So I am appealing to the citizens of Penticton, and my selling point is I represent them. As I stated before, I'm not in the pockets of developers or realtors or special interest groups. I want to represent the people. I'm a common man with a wide range of careers. The curling ice making was only my last. And I look at it as a pragmatist. I look at it as a taxpayer. I look at it with common sense. So I'm a word of mouth guy. Now I'll tell people straight up, I'm probably unlikely to win. But through events like this, through the forums, I'm getting some viewpoints out there. And like the federal NDPs who have never won in the federal election, a lot of their ideas have been picked up by the parties that do win. So part of my strategy here, and it's already happening, some of the other candidates have already taken some of my language and some of my ideas. So even if I don't win, if I can influence whoever does win to maybe change their tack a little bit and incorporate some of these more common sense, prudent ideas, then I feel I will have contributed to the democratic system and to helping make Penticton a better place. But we are on radio, and I'll say to anybody that's listening, you like what I'm saying? Think about it. We just keep running the same old circles. These councils kind of keep making the same types of mistakes and same type of decisions that, to me, don't seem to be pleasing the masses. My goal, you make me mayor, I'm going to look at it from a Pentictonite's perspective, from an everyday working perspective, from a family perspective. I'm 3 years from being officially a senior citizen, from a senior citizen's perspective, with balance, with research, but not paying a ton of consultants, and with pragmatism and prudence with our tax dollars. So that's my strategy. That's why I'm in this race. And you never know. If you don't throw your hat in, you're definitely not going to win. So that's why I went in. That's what I believe. I believe I would do a great job for the citizens, not the special interests, not the developers. My focus is the citizens and making Penticton as pleasant as it can be and being realistic about how we move forward in the future and making Penticton the best city of its size in Canada to live in.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. That was Owen Hayward, a mayoral candidate in 2022 for the city of Penticton. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much for having me, and it was a pleasure.